The sea was calm, too calm. A strange kind of quiet that makes seasoned sailors uneasy. The USS Liberty Strike, the Navy's newest marvel of engineering, sliced through the Atlantic waters on her maiden systems trial. She was everything the brochures promised: nuclear-powered, AI-assisted navigation, radar-invisible plating, and the most complex multi-engine propulsion system ever installed on a Navy ship. The press called it the future of naval dominance. But inside the ship, something wasn't right. Commander Liam Hartley, mid-40s, eyes sharp and uniform crisp, stood in the control room reviewing telemetry on a sleek digital interface. His brow furrowed. "Lieutenant Keller," he said, not looking away from the screen, "run a diagnostic on engine circuit node F12 again. That fluctuation doesn't sit right with me." Keller, a young officer barely out of the academy, nodded. "Aye, sir. Running scan now." Seconds passed. Then a minute. Then. Boom. The ship jerked violently, lights flickered, alarms blared. "Int. Engineering Bay, continuous." Panels sparked, smoke hissed from vents, and the ship's elite engineering crew scrambled into action. Chief Engineer Mason Takeda, mid-30s and brilliant, pulled a fire suppression lever and shouted over the din. "Main propulsion systems offline. Starboard generators are cascading. We're dead in the water." Lieutenant Keller's voice came through the intercom, barely audible. "Commander Hartley, sir, propulsion is dropping below threshold. We've lost the primary system." Hartley slammed his fist on the console. "Shut it down before it fries the whole damn ship." Int. Command deck, moments later. The USS Liberty Strike floated in eerie stillness on open waters. Systems flickered, internal lighting dimmed to emergency red. "Status," barked the Admiral. Admiral Walter Hargrove, late 60s, silver-haired and stoic, entered the control room with calm command presence. "Sir," Hartley said, standing rigid, "we've lost all primary propulsion. Backup systems are misfiring. Chief Takeda says, it's beyond anything he's seen." The Admiral glanced at the frozen interface and then out the window. The ocean stretched to the horizon. A sitting duck. And they all knew it. Cut to, Int. Washington, D.C., Pentagon, Crisis Room. A digital map showed the USS Liberty Strike stalled in the Atlantic. Top brass and civilian engineers paced nervously. "They're stranded 200 miles off the eastern seaboard," said one analyst. "We can't tow a ship that big from that far. And whatever this is, it's systemic. Their engineers are top tier and they can't even locate the root problem." A tense pause. "Do we have any recommendations?" One civilian engineer, Dr. Amanda Roth, stepped forward hesitantly. "There is one man. He's not on our active call list anymore, but he's solved 2 classified naval engine failures before. Once off the coast of Yemen, and again in the Black Sea. Both under hostile conditions." "Why is he not active?" a rear admiral asked. Dr. Roth swallowed. "He retired. Disappeared. Some say, he walked away after being passed up for promotion." The room fell quiet. "Name?" the admiral asked. "Elijah Brooks. Chief Petty Officer. Navy veteran. Engine systems expert. Int. Engineering Bay, USS Liberty Strike, night. 12 hours passed. A second explosion had rocked the secondary fuel bypass. Nothing dangerous, yet, but terrifying enough. Chief Mason Takeda sat with sweat on his brow. Grease stained his uniform. His best engineer, Lieutenant Samir Patel, slumped beside him. "We've run every diagnostic 10 times, Patel whispered. "It's like the system's lying to us." Mason stared blankly at the control panel. "Or it's smarter than we are." He didn't mean it as a joke. Int. Command deck, early morning. Admiral Hargrove stood alone on the bridge, staring at the sea. The storm was building. A soft buzz came from his encrypted satellite phone. "Sir," came Dr. Roth's voice on the other end, "I found him. He lives outside Norfolk. I gave him your direct line." The Admiral blinked. "Will he come?" A pause. He said, "If you ask him, maybe." Int. Virginia, small mechanic shop, later that day. A dusty garage sat at the edge of the woods. It looked more like an old man's hobby shed than a place that once rebuilt engines of war. Inside, a black man in his late 60s, strong despite age, methodically adjusted the timing belt of a rusted pickup truck. Elijah Brooks. His eyes were focused, hands steady, movements slow but sure, the kind that came from decades of solving impossible problems under fire. The satellite phone on his table rang. He looked at it. Didn't move. Rang again. He finally answered. "This is Brooks." A long silence. Then came a voice he hadn't heard in years. "Elijah. It's Admiral Hargrove. We need your help." Elijah's jaw clenched, expression unreadable. "I'm retired, sir." "I know. But it's the Liberty strike. She's dead in the water. None of our people can fix her. No one even understands the failure. But you." "I said I'm retired." A pause. The Admiral's voice softened. "I wouldn't call unless we were out of options." Elijah exhaled slowly. Looked at the photo on the wall, a younger him, in uniform, laughing with his former engine crew. Then looked at the Navy crest still hanging by the door. "Send coordinates," he said, and hung up. Int. USS Liberty strike, hours later, flight deck. A Navy helicopter cut through the thick morning air and touched down on the deck of the Liberty strike. The crew gathered curiously, expecting another team of techs. But only one man stepped off. Black boots touched steel. A weathered man in a faded field jacket, with salt and pepper hair and a quiet presence that silenced the crowd without a word. Chief Elijah Brooks. Some younger officers smirked. One whispered, "Is that their solution?" An old man with a wrench. Admiral Hargrove stepped forward to meet him. They shook hands firmly. "Good to see you, Chief." "You too, sir," Elijah replied, looking past him toward the smoking engine bay. "What have they been trying?" Hargrove gestured toward the data pad. "Everything." Elijah took it, flipped through the diagnostics, and shook his head slowly. "They're listening to the engine like it's a machine." He looked up. "But she's not just that. She talks. You just gotta learn how to listen." The Admiral smiled faintly. "Glad you still remember how steam hissed through fractured valves. Wires hung like twisted veins from metal panels." The heartbeat of the ship was silent. The once brilliant engineering bay, which had dazzled with blinking lights and polished chrome, now looked like a battlefield. Oxygen scrubbers hummed low, and digital displays blinked erratically, off, on, off again. It was as if the ship itself had fallen asleep, confused, or worse, injured. Into this chaos walked Elijah Brooks. The old veteran stood still just inside the threshold, the door hissing closed behind him. A half-dozen engineers stopped mid-motion, staring. Some whispered. "Who's that? He doesn't even have clearance." "I think the Admiral called him in. Said he was a legend back in the day." Mason Takeda, the ship's lead engineer, turned and approached, clipboard in hand and doubt on his face. "You must be Chief Brooks," Mason said, politely but clipped. "I'm Chief Takeda. I've led the repair crews since the first failure." Elijah nodded. "I read your logs." Mason blinked. They were classified. "I still have the eyes to read between the lines," Elijah said calmly, then walked past him, toward the main console. Int. Engine room, main panel. Elijah set his worn bag down. From it, he pulled something none of the others expected. An old leather-bound notebook, its pages smudged with years of oil stains, sketches, and hand-drawn systems. "You don't have a digital interface?" Patel asked, incredulous. Elijah didn't look up. "Digital don't teach you how a ship breathes. This does." He knelt next to the main power relay and removed a panel, running his calloused fingers across the circuit board. It wasn't technical. It was intimate. Reverent. "You're feeling the wires," someone scoffed. Elijah didn't answer. He reached into his bag, pulled out an old naval stethoscope, modified for hull acoustics, and placed it on the steel casing of the engine's lower chamber. Silence. Then, he closed his eyes. Thump. Tick. Vibrate. He opened his eyes. "Your diagnostic tools won't catch this," he said, standing slowly. "Your AI thinks in logic chains. But this," he tapped the chamber, "this is rhythm. Flow. Pulse. And your flow's been off since the last dry dock." Flashback, 1993, USS Vigilance, engine room under fire. Young Elijah Brooks, then in his prime, shouted orders amid deafening cannon fire. The ship rocked violently. Smoke poured from every vent. "We've lost cooling flow," a sailor screamed. "They hit our starboard manifold." Elijah, younger but intense, crawled under a collapsed panel and yelled, "Bypass through the auxiliary coolant lines. Trust me." "But that's not protocol." "We're past protocol, son. We're saving lives now." He rerouted wires and flipped a makeshift switch he had soldered by hand. The engine coughed, choked, and came roaring back to life. Back to present, USS Liberty Strike engine room. "Elijah," Mason said carefully, "we've had every modern engineer, MIT grad, DARPA consultant, even AI-assisted diagnostics, and nothing worked." Elijah looked around the room. "You tried experts. Now try experience." Mason sighed. "We don't even know what's failing." Elijah pointed at the core. "She's not failing. She's fighting herself." A feedback loop's creating micro-resistance across the integrated turbine sequence. Takeda raised an eyebrow. "That's not in the schematic." "Because the schematic doesn't account for vibration resonance from secondary housing torque," Elijah replied. "Whoever designed her modeled her brain. Not her heartbeat." Int. Mess hall, lunchtime. Word had spread. The ship's crew gathered in groups, whispering, watching the old man through cameras and observation points. "Man, no way he fixes it," one sailor said. "I mean, respect and all, but he's analog in a digital world." Another replied, "Yeah. Well, digital's been broken for 2 days straight." Up on the officer's deck, Lieutenant Patel asked the Admiral, "Sir, with all due respect, why him?" The Admiral, arms folded, answered without hesitation. "Because he's the only one who's been inside a machine like this and come out alive. He doesn't read systems. He knows them." Int. Engine bay, night. Elijah worked alone. Everyone else had gone to sleep, but he stayed, sketching notes, testing wires, recalibrating manually what AI couldn't diagnose. Sweat on his brow. Oil on his sleeves. Quiet murmurs to the engine like an old friend. "You're scared, aren't you?" he whispered. "They built you too smart to fail, but not wise enough to heal." He paused. Then reached in, adjusted a converter, and turned a small wrench counterclockwise by just a half degree. A low hum began to stir. Not power, but promise. Montage, the tide turns. Elijah training young engineers using chalk and blueprints instead of tablets. Drawing airflow patterns by hand to explain thermal inefficiency. guiding Patel through recalibrating a faulty compression chamber with a tool made from spare parts. Engineers who once scoffed now gather around his notebook, hanging on every word. Mason watches from afar, stunned. This man was rebuilding not just the engine, but the confidence and culture of the team itself. Int. Command deck, morning. Elijah walked in quietly. Admiral Hargrove looked up. You have something? Elijah handed him a note. Give me 3 hours. And trust. The Admiral nodded. Full access granted. Int. Engine room, 3 hours later. Sweat. Pressure. Silence. Elijah connected the final wire. Everyone held their breath. Are you sure? Mason asked. Elijah smiled faintly. Son, if I wasn't, I'd never risk her soul. He pressed the button. Whirr. The engine ignited with a rumble, low at first, then rising into a deep, steady hum. Lights came on. Panels glowed. The ship vibrated, but in balance. The USS Liberty Strike, after 42 hours dead, was alive again. The room erupted in cheers. Mason looked at Elijah with awe. You brought her back. Elijah just wiped his hands on a rag. No. She just needed someone who still believed in listening. The USS Liberty Strike was once again alive, not just in steel and steam, but in spirit. The hum of the engine was back, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat restored. But in the dim corner of the engine bay, Chief Elijah Brooks sat alone, elbows on his knees, quietly staring at nothing. He wasn't smiling. Because he knew something the others didn't. They thought the engine was the hardest part to fix. But Elijah had lived long enough to know, sometimes, the real damage is deeper. Flashback, 1998, Naval Base Norfolk, briefing room. Young Elijah, early 40s, stood at the head of a table full of Navy brass. Chalk dust stained his uniform. On the board behind him, hand-drawn schematics of a new dual-exhaust cooling system for destroyer-class engines. He spoke with confidence. I propose an overhaul that increases engine lifespan by 23% and reduces emergency failure risk by nearly half. I've built and tested it myself over 18 months in active waters. Silence. Then, a white officer in a higher rank spoke, flipping through the packet. Impressive, Brooks. But these aren't official Navy protocols. I know, sir. I wrote the new protocol. Based on real-world data. The man gave a tight smile. We'll think it over. Int. Hallway outside, moments later. Elijah walked out, pride in his stride. A junior black sailor named Marcus caught up with him. You killed it in there, Chief. Elijah chuckled. Let's see if they read past the first page. But the smile faded when he turned the corner and saw Commander Pierce in another room, presenting Elijah's exact proposal, under his own name. Elijah stood frozen. He didn't say a word. He just walked away. Int. Present, USS Liberty Strike, Mess Hall. The engineering team gathered around Elijah. Word had spread. Even officers off shift came to listen. Mason Takeda leaned against a post, watching Elijah sketch a cross-section of the new flow modification. You ever write a manual on this? One young sailor asked. Elijah chuckled. Wrote a few. Navy never put my name on them, though. They all paused. You serious? Mason asked, stunned. Elijah shrugged. A lot of us wrote things that never made the ink. But the knowledge stuck. That's what mattered. But, why didn't you fight for it? Patel asked. He met their eyes. I did. Once. Then I realized something. When you're the only one in the room who looks like you, sometimes the fight ain't worth losing your soul over. Flashback, 2002, Admiralty office, retirement papers. Elijah sat across from Admiral Hargrove, much younger. "I won't fight them anymore, sir," Elijah said. "You're one step from commander. You've led teams that saved entire fleets." Elijah looked away. "I saved ships. Not reputations. They're not promoting me because they know I won't be quiet when I see wrong." The Admiral exhaled. "You sure about this?" Elijah stood and saluted. "I'm not quitting the Navy. Just leaving the building. Int. Present, observation deck, night." Admiral Hargrove found Elijah alone, overlooking the sea. "She's running better than ever," the Admiral said quietly. Elijah nodded. "Still talks in her sleep. But the rhythm's back." They stood in silence. Then Hargrove added, "I should have fought harder for you back then." Elijah didn't answer right away. "I didn't need medals, sir. I needed room to breathe." "You earned that and more," Hargrove said. "Maybe," Elijah replied. "But a lot of folks earned more than I did, and never got the call you gave me." Int. Engine room, next morning. Elijah stood in front of the assembled engineering crew. He handed Mason a small brass key, part of the original ignition sequence for the engine. "This is your ship now. But don't ever let AI replace intuition. And don't ever let rank silence the right voice." Mason took it with reverence. "Teach that," Elijah added, "and she'll never fall silent again." Int. Naval Academy, Lecture Hall, months later. The screen lit up with a title. Case Study. The Liberty Strike Malfunction and the Human Engine That Saved It. Young cadets listened as Mason Takeda narrated. On the screen, a faded image of Chief Elijah Brooks. "Every system can fail," Mason said. "But the human mind, when trusted, respected, and experienced, can bring miracles back to life." Flash to, Navy Dockyard, plaque unveiling. A new sign gleamed on the side of the USS Liberty Strike. Engineering Bay A, dedicated to Chief Elijah Brooks. He listened when no one else did. Elijah, older now, stood with his hands folded, surrounded by former and current crew. For once, the spotlight wasn't taken from him. And this time, the Navy made sure his name would never be forgotten.